everybody, welcome back. Mike here. Today we're going to be working on this 1968 Harley XLCH. So we're going to be doing a few things to this bike. The first thing is the clutch plates need to be replaced. So we got frictions and steels that are going to be going in. We're going to keep this a dry clutch setup. So we got to make sure the seal on the actual clutch hub is set up nicely and that it has a good seal on it. Take a look at those friction plates and see if they've been soaked in oil. Then we're going to go ahead and replace the rear tire, and I'll show you guys how to make sure it goes on all straight and that your brake is seated in the drum properly. Alright, so we went ahead and removed the primary cover, the foot peg, and the shifter. Now we're going to start taking apart the clutch hub here and looking inside to see if those old plates are covered in oil or what was going on. It's possibly this hub isn't sealing very well. If the seal is good and everything looks good in there, we're going to replace the plates anyway, since we got them. And we're going to try to run this as a dry clutch setup. Now that the clutch is all done, we're going to go ahead and take a look at the wiring harness. So we did a little toggle for the headlight. Wiring harness is really just off the generator. Not a whole lot going on here. Got the regulator back here. Capacitor, super important. You're going to try to not have a battery. You got to make sure your bulbs are in conjunction with that. Got the Bendix carb in it still. The owner said that he actually had just replaced it. So we'll see if we can get those dialed in. Those aren't my favorite. I don't think they're anybody's favorite, but should be good enough. Get this thing going. All right, so now we're going to take a look at this manifold here. I just popped off the carb clamps and loosened the bracket down here. Looks like whoever worked on this before me went ahead and used gasket sealer. So I'm going to clean this off real good. And then we're going to use new gaskets. These ones are roached. And probably revisit the gaskets here. Looks like the gasket sealer continues with the carburetor. All right, so we got the car back on there. Now you can see the gasket sealer's been cleaned up. The boots aren't showing any kind of like distance, any gap between the manifold. You really don't want to see that. It means your carb's falling off. I also went ahead and doubled up on the nuts down here because I noticed that this support bracket got a little tweaked, probably because it was taking a lot of weight, and that just made sure that this was like nice and straight when before it was sagging over. You don't want that. Like a tilted float bowl and everything. So when you're doing the rear brake, one thing you want to make sure you're doing is pressing down on that brake pedal to center that wheel, center the shoes and the drum. You'll actually see the wheel itself move quite a bit when the bike's jacked up. That rear tire's off the ground, and go ahead and I usually try to get it just off the ground barely, like slightly, so that there's some resistance when you go to turn it, but not a lot. Yeah, and then you're also going to be checking down the line of your chain and seeing if it's tweaked at all. That would be an indicator that something's not seated right. All right, so as far as the front brake goes, we have a few different pieces. This came from Sporty Parts. It's considered the brake rod. And then we have the adjuster. It's a separate part. Also came from Sporty Parts. And then they sell the clip. So that's what my customer did, got all three of these. So then the cable was a universal cable that has this ferrule at the end that wasn't matching with the levers that he had, wasn't gonna work for it without like kind of grinding it down. So I just found another cable on through V-Twin, and this one I can just cut down the length. This is gonna end up going in here. It's gonna mount to the bolt along the fender. Put the adjuster up top. And these bolts are essentially gonna be able to adjust tension. And this, after I cut it down to size, is gonna be the sheath for the cable. And then we have this. So yeah, I recommend if you're gonna try to do this, because these cables are hard to find, just work maybe with 2 sets like what I had to do to make it work. This is the adjuster that came with the cable, and I'm not gonna be using that. It just fits a lot more snug. And all this is sportyparts.com, and then this was V-Twin. So yeah, we're working with a bunch of different parts from different places, so they're not necessarily gonna just all plug and play. I noticed that this part of the lever is like kind of catching the cable, so I'm just basically cutting that in a little bit. All right, so I went ahead and filed down that part of the perch. Now you can see there's really no resistance on the cable. Went ahead and mounted the pin in there. Kind of had to do a little Mod Podge work with what we used here. This is not a stock perch. So this cable here, the sheath I should say, is a little bit long, sticking up a little higher than I'd like. So I'm gonna cut that probably 3 inches. And we went ahead and already lengthened up our cable. So what I did, once this sheath was in place, I routed the whole cable through, and then already had this side mounted up ready to clamp on the wire. And I kind of just pulled it tight to get a rough adjustment. I put this in the middle of its adjustment. And yeah, so if we need to cut a little more, we can. I kind of went on the longer side, but that's what you got to do.